powered by demerarawaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. First, the lead stories. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during Wednesday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. Opposition leader Joseph Harmon stopped short of accusing the House Speaker Manzoor Nadir of lying when he claimed that the Parliament has two maces, the symbol of parliamentary authority. And in regional news, the opposition People's Party for Democracy and the United Progressive Party have teamed up to contest the Barbados January 19th general election. And internationally, we'll bring you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during Wednesday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. The mace was removed as Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh was debating the Natural Resource Fund bill despite loud chanting and whistleblowing by opposition parliamentarians.
And so we are witnessing now unprecedented vulgarity in the National Assembly of Guyana, consistent with the vulgarity of the Natural Resource Fund Act that the then APNU-AFC government
One second, Honourable Member. Hold 1 second.
The House Speaker told a news conference that those involved will be punished, but he did not say what sanctions will be imposed.
And in every parliament, an attack on the mace is an attack on the authority of parliament. And that attack on the mace cannot go unpunished. I could not find an easier word than punish.
Mr. Nadir declines to name the parliamentarian who spearheaded the removal of the mace, only saying that the video recordings show who participated in what he termed the terrorist behavior. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir's disclosure that Guyana's parliament has two maces, the symbol of parliamentary authority, is not going down well with opposition leader Joseph Harmon. Mr. Nadir made the disclosure in defending his view that the Natural Resource Fund legislation was properly passed because the mace was in place and most of the government parliamentarians were in their seats when the vote was called Wednesday night.
Since my ascension, we looked at many possible occurrences, and one was to have another mace in the event the traditional mace could not be found to put in place whenever Parliament sits. We have another mace. The smaller mace that we used last evening is an exact replica of the mace that was presented to Guyana by the House of Commons when we became independent.
But Mr. Harman stopped short of accusing the House Speaker of lying.
The Speaker's statement that Guyana has two maces is appalling and is simply untrue. The replica referred to by the Speaker is a miniature mace which was made for the hosting of Guyana's National Youth Parliament. And that mace holds no authority in the sitting of the National Assembly.
He also says that the parliamentary rules do not permit the use of a replica mace.
There is no rule that provides for the use of a replica mace in the National Assembly, as is being touted by the Speaker. The Speaker cannot simply pick up something and replace the official mace of the National Assembly when the rules clearly state that if the mace is not in the House, absolutely no business can be done. Again, there is no provision for the use of a replica or substitute mace.
Asked to respond to Mr. Harman's statement, Mr. Nadir said the leader of the opposition is entitled to his opinion. Minister of Governance and Parliamentary Affairs Gail Teixeira says opposition leader Joseph Harman has a very slim chance of successfully challenging the legality of the Natural Resource Fund legislation. Mr. Harman has suggested that he may go to court to challenge the legality of the Natural Resource Fund law because the mace, the symbol of parliamentary authority, was not in the National Assembly. But Mr. Shearer says such a case may be thrown out.
It would be highly unlikely, and I'm not a lawyer, for the court to get involved in ruling on something like this when the court has already, on a number of issues that were related to Parliament, said no, this is a matter that Parliament has to handle.
Mr. Shearer, however, says that Mr. Harman can bring his own bill or amendments.
Does he have any recourse in Parliament itself? No, he has none. There's no other recourse except he can bring his own bill. If he wants to bring a bill that he feels can do better than what this is, he has a right as a member of Parliament. You can bring a private member's bill. If he thinks there are deficiencies in this bill, he can also, as a member of Parliament, wait a while and come back and propose some amendments to the act now. It would be an act then. He has a right to do that.
The opposition says that the new law puts control of the fund in a board that will be handpicked by the president. On top of that, the opposition says that a 22-member parliamentary oversight committee has been reduced to 9 persons. APNU plus AFC, as well as 5 civil society organizations, say that the formula for withdrawing monies gives the government too much power to abuse and squander Guyana's oil wealth. Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh says no minister can draw down on any of the oil wealth without parliamentary approval. The government has a simple majority to pass any law, motion, or allocation of funds. He says the Natural Resources Fund Act states that whether for regular or emergency financing, the Parliament must give approval.
This minister and any other minister who will come after this minister operating under this act cannot go into the fund and draw down a single dollar for purposes of emergency financing or indeed for any other purposes unless they go to Parliament first, submit a request to the Parliament, and secure approval from the Parliament. So I want to make that crystal clear. There's no arbitrary drawdown for any purpose, emergency or otherwise. There has to be prior parliamentary scrutiny and approval.
Dr. Ashni Singh says The monies will first have to be transferred from the Natural Resource Fund to the Consolidated Fund before they can be allocated and spent. He says if the monies are misused, the Finance Minister can be punished under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. The opposition People's National Congress Reform and a number of civil society organizations fear that amendments to the Natural Resource Fund will create a floodgate to the oil money being used as a slush fund under the guise of emergency funding. The passage of a local content bill now makes it law for foreign companies investing in Guyana's oil and gas sector to employ, hire and use mainly Guyanese services. Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat says Guyanese are now assured of directly benefiting from the downstream of the oil sector under 40 initial areas. The bill provides for Guyanese to register their local businesses with the Local Content Secretariat.
Will require every single Guyanese business to be registered with the Local Content Secretariat of the Ministry. So we will start maybe as soon as next week with the President's permission, ascension to the bill. We will start creating those registers as early as next week. One, to deal with employment, and two, to deal with goods and services. So we'll have two registers, one with names and the background of people who want to work in the oil and gas sector, and two, with the local businesses, the companies that would like to do business with the oil and gas companies.
The law also requires foreign companies to submit a 5-year and annual plan for review by the Secretariat. The Natural Resource Minister says through the law they are required to do business with Guyanese-owned and registered companies.
Every single business and every single Guyanese would like to have 100% here. And I would want to see that too, because from us on the government side, the reason why we presented this bill and we had it passed in the National Assembly is because we want Guyanese to benefit from the oil and gas sector. We didn't leave it at a policy level and the goodwill of companies. We have an act now compelling oil companies to do business with Guyanese company. So that is a guarantee from the government that we want Guyanese to benefit. We want Guyanese to benefit. And we want this to be 100% right through. And we want to add 40 more services to it. But then we must have the capacity to do it.
The law provides for a certain percentage of Guyanese involvement in oil companies, including equal pay for local and expatriate.
The 90% of the office space rented by oil companies, be it ExxonMobil, CNOOC, Hess, or whatever the case is, it must be owned by Guyanese. Or Guyanese must have at least 50% of the share. Accommodation, apartments, example, 90%. Waste management, 75%. Warehousing, 60%. Janitorial supply services, 90%. Food supply, 75%. Lay-down yard facility, 90%. The local insurance, as I mentioned, 100%. Local legal services, 90%. Security services, 95%. Trucking services, 100% Guyanese. And these are just a few.
The Minister of Natural Resources says the law is subject to review as Guyana increases capacity, which provides for the Minister to issue an order for the change and or inclusion. The joint services to closely monitor Old Year's Night events to avoid large gatherings and the spread of COVID-19. Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony says the government is strict on ensuring that all businesses and entertainment spots abide by COVID-19 measures governing those businesses. The Health Minister says there will be increased joint services patrols to ensure compliance with the measures. The Health Minister urges the public to also obey the protocols, failure to which may result in increased COVID cases. Dr. Anthony says an increased number of cases after the holidays can quickly overwhelm the health system. Dr. Frank Anthony advised against using cloth masks, which are less effective, and for the public to make the N95 mask their choice of mask to wear. The Health Ministry's official COVID data shows a significant increase in positive COVID-19 cases following the Christmas weekend. The data shows 157 new COVID infections recorded in the last 24 hours. However, there was only one death of an unvaccinated male, which takes the death toll to 1,052. The number of persons in the COVID intensive care unit remains low at 7 persons. The number of persons hospitalized saw a marginal increase, which now stands at 35 persons. The ministry says 711 persons are now home isolating, which also increased after the Christmas weekend. The health minister is warning that should persons not follow measures, the number of positive cases is likely to increase after the end-of-year activities. A 57-year-old man of Walton Hall, Essequibo Coast, was Thursday afternoon burnt to death in his house. He has been identified as Ramdas Samnas. The Guyana Fire Service says it is currently investigating the cause of the blaze at 91 Walton Hall. Samdas lived in the one-flat wooden building with his partner, Sarojin Pasad. The house and its contents were also destroyed by the blaze. The Guyana Fire Service, meanwhile, appealed to Guyanese to equip their homes with smoke detectors and fire extinguishers and to be careful when cooking or using electrical appliances. The fire service is also advising persons to unplug electrical appliances after use and do not leave them plugged in for prolonged periods. Also, they are being asked not to overload power strips or electrical circuits and ensure stoves are turned off properly when cooking and ensure matches or cigarettes are put out completely when smoking. And now in regional news. The opposition People's Party for Democracy, PDP, and the United Progressive Party, UPP, have teamed up to contest the January 19 general election. In a Barbados Today report, Bishop Joseph Attlee made the announcement at a news conference Thursday morning. He says the new coalition will be called the Alliance Party for Progress. Mr. Attlee says Lynette Eastmond will serve as deputy leader and the party will offer better governance. Prime Minister Mia Mottley called elections 18 months before constitutionally due elections are held in 2023. The Joint Trade Union Movement, JTUM, has written to Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, Faris Al-Rawi, seeking answers to the government's impending vaccination policy for public servants come mid-January. JTUM General Secretary Ozzy Warwick delivered the letter to the Attorney General on Thursday. Following a meeting with JTUM last week, Al-Rawi said the government had no intention of withdrawing the safe zone policy and called on the group to provide recommendations. The AG said then that the union provided no suggestions and refused to discuss the issue of furloughing of workers should they not take the COVID-19 vaccine. According to Loop News Trinidad, in its letter, the union said statements made by the Attorney General at a press conference following the meeting with the unions were totally inconsistent with the union's understanding of the meeting. The union's letter calls for respectfully resolving issues and for the follow-up meeting date and time. The unions also requested answers from the Attorney General about the government's mandatory vaccine policy as a requirement for international funding, and is it that the government is carrying out an IMF or World Bank conditionality to downsize the public sector workforce? The JTEM also wants the AG to provide answers on the percentage of vaccinated public service workers and if requirement is extended to private sector businesses where public servants shop. The JTEM asked the Legal Affairs Minister to state if the safe zone will include schools, prisons and landfills, and who will perform the duties of public servants if the unvaccinated are removed. The union in its letter quizzed the AG as to the arbitrary deadline date and its linkage to the expiration in January 2022 of vaccines and the percentage of vaccines which expire by February 2022. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Neil Nunes with the BBC News. Fast-moving wildfires in the U.S. state of Colorado have destroyed hundreds of homes and forced the evacuation of tens of thousands of people. The state governor, Jared Polis, described the situation as absolutely devastating. More now from Ben Lowings.
Videos from aircraft flying over Denver show a sinister orange glow across the city's northwestern suburbs. Sparks from power lines ignited the fires in grassland, which had been suffering from an unusual drought. Despite near-freezing air temperatures, a fierce mountain wind allowed the blaze to take hold, taking many residents by surprise. A disaster relief operation is underway, but power supplies have been hit and heavy snowfall is expected to bring whiteout conditions.
A court in the Vietnamese capital Hanoi has sentenced a man to 5 years in prison after finding him guilty of spreading propaganda. The details from Celia Hatton.
Lê Trung Hung is a longtime activist and citizen journalist, handing out copies of the Vietnamese constitution and helping those who wanted to petition the government, particularly in land dispute cases. He also tried to run as an independent candidate for a seat in Vietnam's National Assembly, but he was arrested in March, 2 months before the election. Lê Trung Hung's wife, a fellow activist named Do Lê Na, was prevented from attending the trial. She's complained on social media about the aggressive monitoring she and her 2 young children have experienced during her husband's detention.
The Ennahda Party, opposition party in Tunisia, says one of its leading officials has been detained by the security forces. Ennahda said that Noureddin Bihri was arrested outside his house and taken to an unknown location. Mr. Bihri is the first senior official in the moderate Islamist Ennahda to be detained since President Kais Saied dismissed parliament in July. Kenya's Education Minister George Magoya says all gay and lesbian students should be barred from attending boarding schools. The often outspoken politician said they should be transferred to day schools to prevent them from influencing other boarders. President Biden has used his latest phone call with his Russian counterpart to stress that the U.S. will lead a decisive response if Russia further invades Ukraine. The Kremlin said President Putin made it clear that any new sanctions would be a colossal mistake. From Moscow, here's Andrei Goryanov.
It doesn't look like that they have achieved a lot. Let's think of it as a preparation talks ahead of Geneva in January. It's very important that presidents have talked for the second time in past 3 weeks, and it looks like there is a lot to prepare ahead of January talks.
World news from the BBC. France has become the latest country to confirm that the fast-spreading Omicron variant has become its main coronavirus strain. Public health officials said more than 60% of tests were consistent with Omicron, compared to 15% last week. It's caused a huge surge in infections with more than 200,000 cases recorded in 24 hours. The body of the late South African anti-apartheid campaigner Archbishop Desmond Tutu is lying in state for a second day in Cape Town. Our South Africa correspondent Nomsa Maseko is outside St. George's Cathedral.
2,000 people have filed past his body so far since it lied in state from yesterday, and many more are still queuing to do so. The government now, with the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions, it does appear that many more people will be able to file past his body and even make it to his funeral physically. But for those who will not be able to do so, there will be public viewing areas in many parts of the country that will allow as many people as possible to pay their last respects.
The Philippines National Disaster Agency says more than 400 people are now known to have been killed in Typhoon Rai, the deadliest to hit the country this year. More deaths were due to drowning, fallen trees and landslides. The disaster agency head said 82 people were still missing and more than 1,000 injured. The Cafe Owners Association in Sri Lanka has decided to suspend selling milk tea after the cost of milk powder shot up owing to import restrictions. They said they were also struggling with a shortage of cooking gas cylinders. The government has banned the import of several items, including some essential food products, because of a severe foreign exchange reserve crisis. BBC World News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return-to-work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
To end the news, here is a recap of the leads. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during Wednesday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. Opposition leader Joseph Harman stopped short of accusing the House Speaker, Manzoor Nadir, of lying when he claimed that the Parliament has two maces, the symbol of parliamentary authority. And in regional news, the opposition People's Party for Democracy and the United Progressive Party have teamed up to contest the Barbados January 19 general election. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves. If you miss No Big Thing, then it's a big thing. So No Big Thing will be aired on January 1 at 9 hours and 18 hours and on January 2 at 14 hours on 103.1 FM News Talk Radio Guyana and streamed on bit.ly/newstalk1031. That's bit.ly/newstalk1031. No Big Thing on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM. January 1 at 9 hours and 18 hours and January 2 at 14 hours.